Hello, I'm David, and this is a quick speech on the cooperative principle, an important rule in communications that determine how we talk to each other effectively and help us understand messages between each other that oftentimes is used to make it so that we don't have to say every word in order to get our full message across. Or if we accidentally leave out key pieces of information, that information is going to be conveyed through context. There's 4 parts to this principle. You have, and keep in mind, this is a paper from the 70s written by a guy named H.P. Grice. So a lot of the language is very outdated in terms of the words he uses. So I'll do my best to try and modernize it as I can. But there's 4 parts to this: the maxim of quantity, the maxim of quality, the maxim of relation, and the maxim of manner. In modern English, that's not crazy, fancy, full of philosophical words. That is, how much you're going to tell me, is it related to what I'm talking to or not? Is it truthful? And are you speaking my language? Are you speaking in my tone of voice? Are you using fancy formal language? Or are you using street folk speak? Those 4 principles together, each on their own, work together to make up the full entire part of the cooperative principle. The first is the maximum quantity, and is probably the most important of the 4. And it can best summarize it by saying, just tell me what I need to know. I don't need to know everything you did today. You should only convey as much information as you need to in order to get your message across. Any more than that, you're wasting the other person's time, or you're starting to sound like you're trying to do something suspicious, right? Because if I'm telling you more information than is completely obvious, then there's something suspicious going on there. Classic example, you've probably seen a cartoon where the main character breaks a vase or something with their baseball bat. And the parent walks in and like, hey mom, last I checked, your vase is perfectly fine. No need to look at it, it's totally not broken. And then surprise, surprise, the parent figure looks at the vase and, oh no, it's broken. Well, that's a perfect case of quantity in the maximum quantity in the cooperative principle. I didn't need to be told that the vase is fine. Why did you tell me that the vase was fine? Well, it's because it was broken. You're trying to make me not think about the vase. That's ended up breaking the cooperative principle, and I got this poor protagonist in trouble for breaking a vase with a baseball bat. That's the maximum quantity in action. Only tell me as much as I need to know. Anything more is excessive and possibly suspicious. Next is the maximum of quality or truthfulness, which you can basically summarize as saying, please don't lie to me. It's probably the most straightforward part of the 4. It's just we assume that everything people say should be truthful, because if you're not being truthful, that means you're lying to me, and if you're lying to me, you're not being helpful. And if you're not being helpful, you're not being cooperative. It's where the main name of the cooperative principle comes in, because you're assumed to be helping each other. So if you're going to lie to me, you're not helping me. And keep in mind, this does kind of get into a gray area of, well, what if my girlfriend asks me, do I look okay today? And I'm not really sure, and I'll make something up just to be nice, right? That's kind of where it gets into the gray area of the cooperative principle, is situations like that. But for the most part, the idea still stands that following these 4 principles makes everything better. The next one is in terms of relation, which is, are you related to what I'm talking about right now? And I don't need to know the ingredients for spaghetti in your car commercial, Dad. Keep it relevant and keep it in tone and meaning. This is kind of where you get the video game syndrome of you do something and the NPC just gives a generic response that doesn't matter. It also determines how, if something happens to somebody, we're going to change their attitude and their tone based upon it. If something awful happens to somebody, we expect them to be sad and morose. If something great happens, you'd expect them to be all nice, happy, and bombastic. And when those things don't add up is where you start getting a breakdown and somebody starts thinking, okay, something's wrong here. I'm wondering if this guy's having a good day or not. And this is why you need to always watch for context, because the context of words is much more important than the words themselves. For example, the classic example as outlined in the paper by H.P. Grice was talking about one of his students that, for lack of a better term, was not very smart. He was asked to write a recommendation letter for this student, and let's just say he didn't want to write one at all, but he was contractually obligated to. And he ended up writing that his command of English was excellent and his attendance was regular. Direct quote. And that was the whole letter. 2 lines, and he was depending on the reader on the other end to interpret that. Since it's only 2 lines, and it's probably the most generic stuff you could put on a recommendation letter, this guy wasn't going to be a guy you should hire, but it's technically a recommendation letter. That's kind of the idea of relation, and also a bit of quality, a bit of quantity and quality as well. Keep it relevant and keep it in meaning. The last is manner, which it's probably the most hard to define of all of them, but you can think of it as you wouldn't go out speaking Shakespearean English on the streets. And likewise, you shouldn't be using really slang, informal language in academic term paper. That's the general idea behind manner and tone, is just speak in meaning and speak to your audience. You shouldn't be using really outdated mannerisms. But with all that said, it's important that we actually look at some practical examples besides the ones I mentioned. So I'm going to go ahead and show you 2 classic examples, one of which is from an internet comic called XKCD that did an excellent job of pointing out why some advertisements can seem really suspicious and also really disingenuous. And the other is from a movie you may have watched, Transformers 4, that shows about why certain scenes may seem out of place in a film.
Your car? Huh?
As you can see in this Transformers clip, our main hero here drinks a bottle of Bud Light off the ground after he crashes into a Bud Light truck. Keep in mind, this is in a Transformers movie during the main action scene, and you probably could summarize this by saying, yeah, I love the new Transformers movie, especially the part where the main protagonist drinks a Bud Light for 5 minutes. Now, if you could probably tell by the context that I'm not being entirely serious about that. I'm being sarcastic. I'm giving an opposite impression of what my words are physically saying. That's the cooperative principle in action. Even though my words are saying, yeah, I really like this movie in this one scene, the context is saying, yeah, I really wish this scene wasn't in the movie. I found it obnoxious and I wish it wasn't included. That's the cooperative principle in action. It's how you can determine that something different is being said despite the words giving a completely different impression. You can tell that because of how much I'm telling you. Why are you talking about this one scene in particular, and why is it so specific to Bud Light? You can tell because of tone. I'm giving a sarcastic expression when I say it. I'm giving it sarcastic expression, so it's kind of obvious that I'm not really being serious. You can tell because of relation, because what does Bud Light have to do with Transformers? Absolutely nothing. And finally, you can tell because of quality, because I just showed you the clip of this guy drinking Bud Light. I mean, does this really fit in a Transformers movie? No, of course not. And then moving on to this next one from XKCD, we have 3 boxes of cereal lined up in an aisle. We've got a regular Honey Nut Cheerios or whatever, and then you got Corn Flakes. And then finally, you have asbestos-free Fruit Loops. And immediately you'll probably wonder, why is this Fruit Loops pointing out that it's asbestos-free? Don't all 3 of these cereals not have asbestos in them? Last I checked, you can't put asbestos in food. And yes, that's completely true, and that's also exactly why it's a really scummy marketing tactic, because it breaks the cooperative principle to make it seem like the other 2 cereals do have asbestos in them. The reality is, none of them have asbestos in them. But by saying this one's asbestos-free, the maximum quantity says, well, if this one doesn't have asbestos, then these do, because they wouldn't advertise that they don't have asbestos if they didn't have it. That's breaking the cooperative principle, and it's not very honest at all, and it's a very scummy marketing tactic, especially when you consider that you can have fine print where the main advertisement can say 0% down on your new car, and then you read the fine print and it's like only for 1 person out of 1 million that's going to get that actual 0%. You're not wrong, but you're also not being fully honest either. You're breaking the quality truthfulness part, and you're also giving me more information than should really be necessary. I don't need to be told cereal doesn't have asbestos in it. But with all that said, that's the cooperative principle, and if you start looking for it in your everyday conversations, You'll probably start finding it in a lot of different ways that you hadn't realized. It just wasn't obvious until I pointed it out. And I hope that should at least give you some more understanding of how language works, linguistics as a whole. And for this, I'd like to go ahead and thank Tom Scott for his excellent video on the cooperative principle that helped give me a lot of inspiration and also a lot of primary sources for this topic. I'd also like to thank H.B. Grice for his excellent research into what the cooperative principle is all the way back in the 1970s. And lastly, I'd like to thank you for putting up with me for so long. Thank you.